Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Fourth Bag. Here we are, episode 13, week 5 of the NFL season, and I'm here virtually with Dean Lang. Dean, nice to see you again.
You too, Chris.
I've gone old school today. I guess you can call it old school. It's Dr. Pepper, Canada's finest. What do you got with us?
Butter Ripple Schnapps. I won this bottle at some cornhole tournament a while ago, so
That's just the bottle of schnapps, eh?
Butter Ripple Schnapps.
So you're gonna just swing it right from that?
Yeah.
All right, dude. Cheers. So is Butter Ripple Schnapps something that you might have saw at the movie theater last week on Friday night at the room screening?
No, they didn't have that. They just had vodka and scotch mixed together for the one scene, which is just a waste of perfectly good scotch.
And how did your spoon signing go? Did you end up getting your plastic spoon signed by anybody? Did anybody sort of like any notoriety, anybody there to take note of?
No. Greg Sestero only comes to Kitchener, Waterloo every once in a while, but the last time I saw him there, he signed my spoon, he signed my football. So I already got all that taken care of then. I went with my cousins, Ryan and Dawn, and I had gone with Ryan several times, and this was Dawn's first time. And coming out of the movie, she said 10 out of 10 for the experience, -3 out of 10 for the movie. And I think that might be being a touch generous, frankly, about the movie.
And what were your thoughts? Was there anything that you were just really looking forward to? Was there a specific scene that stands out that you thought, you know what? Oh, I can't wait for this scene to come up, and you made sure that they were paying attention for that part?
Not particularly. It's all kind of 90% of the scenes serve no purpose to the actual plot. They're all just kind of shoehorned in to fill out time. Like there's a scene where this drug dealer confronts Denny on the roof while Denny is dribbling his basketball, even though the roof doesn't have a basketball net. And next thing you know, Chris R, the drug dealer, pulls out a gun and says, "Where's my fucking money, Denny?" And then we never see Chris R again. He gets disarmed by Johnny and Mark, and we never see him again. We never hear about Denny's drug problem again. Lisa's mother brings up that she has breast cancer, and we never hear about it again.
So there might be some sort of maybe sort of plot loopholes. The whole story doesn't connect. Kind of like the reason why it gets a -3 out of 10.
Oh, there's enough dangling plot threads to weave a blanket. The whole movie is one big plot hole, really. I mean, I guess at its core, it's just like a melodramatic love triangle, and that does sort of get resolved. But really, there's all these side plots that go nowhere.
And so really you could walk into that movie at any point in time and say you saw everything, but also you kind of missed nothing, because there's no coherent story. It's just a bunch of disjoint sort of thoughts. Somebody just decided to write a script and that's what came out. Like, I don't know. This movie sounds like a solid -3 out of 10. Maybe they were onto something there.
No, I thought that was a little generous. That's a good rating for it. Yeah, I mean, there's about 10 minutes of plot that is devoted to the love triangle, which is the main plot, and then there's 12 to 15 minutes of sex scenes, which are devoted to most of that's devoted to the main plot as well, and then the rest of it's just scenes that are introduced, characters introduced one time, plot lines introduced one time that are never mentioned again.
Do you think that when he was Tommy Wiseau, right? Do you think that when he was writing this, he thought oh man, I got a buddy I got to write this part for, and so he writes the part in, gets him in for one line, and then thinks of another friend. He's like, hey, I'm going to write in a part for you too, and so he writes in the thing for them, and then they're in the movie and never hear from them again.
I don't think the characters that were or the actors that were cast as those characters that are introduced for one scene were friends of Tommy's. It sounds like the guy who played Chris R really didn't care much for Tommy, so I don't think that was it. I think he wrote the Johnny character for himself to play because he wanted to be an action hero in the scene where he disarms Chris R, and he wanted to be the guy that everybody says is the greatest guy ever, and he wanted to I don't know, make out with some girl and fuck her belly button. I mean, like I don't know, he kind of like wanted to fulfill all of his fantasies or whatever. And when he wrote the script, he went into hiding. Like Greg Sestero said, he never saw him for weeks on end, months, several months, 6 to 9 months or something. I don't remember exactly how long, but it was months. Tommy was just off doing his own thing, and he came back out of that, and the script was finished.
Well, it's gonna go down into movie folklore as one of, I guess, the best worst movies of all time, and we can agree on a -3 out of 10 being a generous rating. Maybe there will be a time where I will dabble in and watch The Room, and if I do that, I will make sure that I'm there with you to do it. We could do it together, maybe at a future date. Don't hold your breath, but you know what? maybe as you're saying, there's a chance.
I think the 10 out of 10 experience is fair, so I recommend it. Next showing at Princess is November the 3rd.
There you go.
So
by November, we might have a World Series champion. See how I segue here? And you know what? You're saying there's a chance. You're saying there's a chance that the Blue Jays this year might have a chance to repeat the 92-93 success. I am just a total homer, and I have a bunch of tickets, a bunch of money riding on the Jays at various odds throughout the season. If I was ever bored with a bet, I threw that bet on the Blue Jays. I'm very excited with this new playoff format. I like the idea. I've actually been to a single wild card game, and the atmosphere is just electric at the Dome. But now with this new 3-game sort of series, the wild card's going to have a different flavor this weekend. And so, what are your thoughts this weekend on, we got 8 teams in action. Who do you like to sort of come out of this? Who are you watching for in this wild card weekend?
I think the Jays will get past Seattle. The rest of the series, actually, all 4 series are very interesting. The Mets are the best team playing this weekend. They got a little unlucky that the Braves just were a juggernaut down the stretch and passed them for the division title, but the Mets won 101 games. Now, they've announced that they will not play DeGrom in this series unless they're in a must-win game. They won't start DeGrom until they lose a game. And I think it's a good strategy, but I don't know that they should have announced it. I don't want to give the Padres any kind of bulletin board material.
Sure.
So the Padres are no slouches. They're a formidable opponent. The Phillies Cardinals is probably the most interesting series to me because the Phillies are throwing out Wheeler and Nola. That's Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola the first 2 games, and those guys can strike out people in bunches. But the Cardinals just they have the ability to shock people in October. They don't look like they're going to be much at the start of the season, and they're always here. So
the other series you have is Tampa Bay, and I'm watching a lot of the Rays down the stretch, and they're playing at Cleveland. What do you like to see in that series there?
I give the edge to Tampa Bay, but they're limping down the stretch. Like I feel like Tampa Bay is the better team here, but yeah, they haven't played well at all the last couple weeks. So we'll see. It'll be 3-game series. These are going to be fun because you never know what's going to happen. It's a lot more random than a 7-game series. That's for sure.
When you're placing bets in these types of series, do you plan on doing any would you be betting on the series, or at this point are you just sort of betting on individual games for the wild card for the action on the weekend?
These series, I'm probably just going to take individual games. I mean, I think pick wise, I'll take for the series Tampa Bay, St. Louis, Toronto, and the Mets, but I'm not going to throw any money on the series themselves. I'm not that confident in those picks because a 3-game series is a lot of.
You can get a pitcher that gets hot, and a pitcher kind of like a goalie a goalie can steal a series in hockey. A pitcher can steal a game in baseball. And if you only got to steal 2 games, you get 2 hot starters, and an offense goes lukewarm. These wild card series is going to be a wild weekend. It's going to be very fun to sort of see who comes out of it.
Yeah, like Philadelphia with Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. Those are two guys who can just strike out people in bunches. And I mean, St. Louis is the better team, but those two guys are capable of just locking in and I mean the Cardinals are not they're not world beaters. They're very good, but they're not world beaters.
I'm making a note here to take the strikeouts on Phillies and the props when I start making some tickets for tomorrow. Did getting as much information as I can from Dean.
So I mean the Jays, they better I could say if they're gonna win the series, they gotta win tomorrow because Manoah's been their guy all year. He's been a stud down the stretch.
Yeah,
And
as I've watched him pitch, and you always just feel comfortable with Manoah on the mound. It's like it's an off day for the bullpen. The guy's going to go deep into a game. He's going to give them their best, and hopefully the bats can pick it up right out of the gate. And the Jays, top to bottom, their lineup is I love it. I just hope that I just hope that they show up, and with the crowd at the Rogers Center, I know it's going to be electric. It's going to be a great atmosphere in Toronto this weekend.
oh, definitely. The Jays, they're getting to play a little more playoff baseball, but they went 93 or from 94 through 2014 without any playoff baseball. So every time they're good, the Toronto supports the Jays.
Yeah. And I know they're fresh off of the Raptors playoff runs and the city's hungry for another winner and hopefully the Jays can come through with a nice deep run.
Yeah, I mean, they support the Leafs unconditionally, which is why the Leafs never win anything. But that doesn't go for the Leafs or the Raptors the same way. I mean, the Raptors have won a championship just 3 years ago, and well, the Jays, well, at least, I mean, it's been almost 30 years, but that's 25, 26 years shorter than the time since the Leafs last won. And so this is the first year of this format. They've added a playoff team to each league, and they've done away with game 163. That's why the Braves and Mets did not have a one-game playoff, even though they were tied. Now, the Braves kind of they didn't, that last game, they knew it didn't mean anything, so they weren't too worried about it. But they've done away with game 163, and we have these wild cards. So in the AL, Houston and the Yankees have byes. Houston's going to meet the winner of the Jays and Mariners, and the Yankees are going to face the winner of the Rays and Cleveland. And then in the NL side, you have Atlanta and the Dodgers getting byes, and Atlanta's going to face the winner of St. Louis, Philadelphia, and the Dodgers are going to face the Mets Padres winner. It's a true bracket, so it's not like hockey where the best team plays the lowest team, even though you probably should do that. That's probably the fair way to do it. I mean, because if the Phillies were to beat the Cardinals, the Phillies are the 60. The Braves would get to play the Cardinals, and the Dodgers would have to play the Mets or the Padres, which is, right, I think, a tougher matchup.
My thought with that was that I figured they wanted to make sure that the team that won the league, they want to make sure that they're playing a wild card team and they're not playing another division winner potentially. And maybe they can, have preset travel schedules and have things sort of planned out so they can kind of have that certainty, rather like it's all kind of crammed into a short period of time. I don't know for sure what the reasoning is, but that was my first thought when I saw the bracket.
Maybe. I mean, but how would the 1 seed ever play the 3, right? How could the 3 ever be in that scenario? How could 1 ever play 3 if 1 gets to play the lowest? 3 can't possibly be the lowest. I don't know. Whatever their reasoning, I'm sure that I guess is more just to keep it moving, and so that the teams know who they're playing. Like the teams that are on bye know what series they get to play the winner of, because it's hard in baseball to sit for 3 days after you've been playing every single day for all this time.
Yeah, now the teams can focus on 2 teams to prepare for, so they can prepare their lineups and their players for 1 of 2 teams versus 1 of 4 teams. So it reduces some variability there as well.
Yeah, that probably that would make sense. That's probably why that happened.
So looking back at your so to date, actually, Dean, your record on these picks against the spread in the super contest, you're 15-4-1, which, I mean, if I were to tell you 4 weeks ago, hey, Dean, you know what, you're going to be 15-4-1 through 20 picks, I'm sure you would take that all day. That is just like that is quite a performance, including a perfect week. And last week, you got to push with the Bills, so you're into the tie column, and then four more picks. You ran off the Chargers, the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Raiders. And so you've had quite the start to these picks. How are you feeling about that?
Oh, I feel great. I'll take 15-4-1 for 4 weeks forever and ever. It's not going to happen. The fact of the matter is that you're a raving genius if you hit 60% over the long term, and even 55% against the spread over the long term, you'll take that. And the winners of these super contests usually end up at about 70% for the year. Last year's champion was 62-28, just shy of 70. Sometimes it's just above 70. But that 68 to 72% mark is going to win you these contests. And even then, I remember in years past, the champion came back the next year and they were right around the 500 mark the next season. That just shows you how hard it is to maintain a 70% clip over any sustained period.
Well, hopefully for all of us listening, you will be able to maintain some semblance of that clip. I know it's lofty goals, but why don't we dig into to this week's matchups? The first matchup you have here, I have a little tidbit here. So the Jaguars are playing, and they're home to the Texans. And the Texans are actually on an 8-game winning streak. Now, this dates back to the Deshaun Watson days and last year as well. But you do like the Jaguars -7 at home against the Texans. Tell me your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, the Jags are a totally different team this year than they have been previous years. The Jags have been atrocious in the past years, but this year they actually seem to be pretty good. I mean, last week they were in a close game against the Eagles. They had an early lead, but they couldn't hold it. But it was rainy. It's probably going to be a lot more comfortable and warm in Jacksonville this Sunday. And the Texans, meanwhile, they get outgained every week by a lot. They haven't been able to stop anybody's running game. The Bears shredded them. The Chargers moved the ball. And, at some point, if you're getting outgained by 100+ yards every week, you're going to lose big. And, I mean, Jacksonville, I'd have to think, is motivated by the fact that they've lost 8 in a row. And I don't think they're going to do a nap like the Chargers did in the middle of that game. The Chargers were up 27-7 at the half and let it get to 27-24. The Jags showed they're just as good as the Chargers so far. Well, I mean, they steamrolled them by 4 touchdowns in LA. So I like the Jags here at home to come back strong off of that loss to the Eagles, which frankly isn't a bad loss, and start to avenge that loss against the Texans because they're just a much better team.
All right. The next one we got the Saints, and they're home to the Seahawks, and the Saints are back home. They were across the pond last week, and they played last week. They didn't have Jameis Winston, they didn't have Alvin Kamara, and if you were a fantasy owner, you didn't get that Kamara news officially until super early on Sunday morning, and also Michael Thomas. You do like the Saints though this week, -5.5, and they're home to the Seahawks. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, Chris. Last weekend, the Saints, their defense played well. That 28 points doesn't tell the story. The offense put them on some short fields. And other than that opening drive where the Vikings went down the field, nothing came easy. The Saints put up a good game and came up a little bit short. Meanwhile, Seattle put up 48 points against Detroit in a 48-45 shootout, but they had only scored, I think, 47 points in the first 3 games of the season. So that's an aberration. I think they're going to regress to the mean. We're going to see more of the true Geno Smith on the road that we've come to know in his career. So the Saints defense should be able to hold Seattle's offense in check. Meanwhile, Kamara should be back this week. He said, I'm ready to rock and roll. And it doesn't matter for New Orleans if Winston or Dalton plays, frankly, because like I said last week, I don't know if there's any team in the NFL that loses less when they go from the starter to the backup. In fact, I'm not convinced that Winston is better than Andy Dalton at all. Seattle's defense hasn't stopped anybody, really. So I think New Orleans will have success moving the ball on their side, and they have to have this game. They're 1-3. They have playoff aspirations. As do most teams in the NFC, because it's so watered down in that middle part. There's really only a few good teams, but they had playoff aspirations before the season started. And if they want to go to the playoffs, they're backs to the wall here. I think they get it done.
All right. And the next one you got here, speaking, you were talking about backup quarterbacks there. You've got just a disastrous injury with Tua. I remember watching it on in prime time last week. Teddy Bridgewater stepped in and he, was slinging the ball to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had another monster game. You like the Dolphins here, -3.5. They're on the road against the Jets.
I do. When the advanced line came out before the games last weekend, Miami was favored by 6 here. And now Tua gets injured and they're now a 3.5 point favorite. That's just extra value in the sense that I don't think Tua to Teddy Bridgewater is that much of a decline, if any. And Bridgewater has shown himself to be a steady hand his whole career. He's never had a receiver like Tyreek Hill. So he's going to be able to step in and be effective with Miami and the weapons they have. And, the Jets are coming off of another win where they were down double digits in the fourth quarter and scored 2 fourth quarter touchdowns to win improbably. And this one's not nearly as improbable as the Cleveland one, but still, and they've been blown out by Baltimore and Cincinnati this year. Miami is very comparable as a team to those two, so they should be able to handle the Jets in this one, plus with the extra time to prepare as well. I mean, Tua's injury, man, I don't know why he was out there. You see he had a concussion, something that's just wrong. That should never have happened that way.
Yeah, it was just a scary situation to watch. You see it and you see the replay and you just see the way he just hits the ground and it just, I don't know, there was a lot of talk about, the panel and at halftime, and they were talking about just like these guys, these are all human people, right? Like these people who have to go out there and they're on live television. They have to actually talk about, the game and talk about next week. But one of their own is down there on the ground and there was good news coming out from the team that he was moving extremities and he was still, in that. So prayers for Tua and hopefully he, makes a recovery from his injuries.
Absolutely. Like you said, these are human beings.
We've talked about backup quarterbacks quite a bit, and there's another team who's on their third quarterback now. So it's the Zap Show in New England. And the Lions are going to be visiting, and you like the Lions +3 here at New England. Tell me about the Lions and the Patriots here.
Yeah, this was the fifth pick that I decided on, and I actually had there were 4 underdogs that I was choosing in between. I was liking the Commanders as a home underdog against the Titans, the Browns against the Chargers, and the Panthers against the Niners, except couldn't pull the trigger on those in this spot. Carolina, because Mayfield has a pathetic 15.3 QBR. I mean, if he was just the player he was last year in Cleveland, he doesn't need to be the player he was 2 years ago. Just the one last year, Carolina would be a decent team. And I mean, San Francisco, short week, having to travel across 3 time zones. This spot's tailor-made for Carolina to cover 6.5 at home. But Mayfield's just been pathetic, so I couldn't pull the trigger there. But ultimately, what I like about Detroit is their defense had an absolutely pathetic display, giving up 48 points to the Seahawks. I was worried about Detroit last week, the offensive side of the ball being short some key players, but they were able to move the ball offensively. That wasn't the problem. I know their defense isn't good, but allowing 48 to Seattle is absolutely pathetic. And they weren't embarrassed before that, but they were embarrassed here. So I figure their defense is going to come into this and step up and play against New England's potentially third string quarterback here. Plus New England went the full overtime against Green Bay. That extra 10 minutes of football takes a toll on a team the next week. And I feel like Detroit getting those 3 points is a good play here.
All right. And your last game of the week, you've got Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay was just they kind of got taken by the Chiefs last week, and they're home here to Atlanta. And something interesting to note here is that Atlanta's actually, I believe they've covered every game here this year. But you like Tampa Bay -8.5 at home to Atlanta. So tell me what you think about Tampa Bay covering the spread.
Yeah. First thing, Mariota's not Mahomes. I mean, the Chiefs had a ton of success moving the ball against Tampa Bay, but Atlanta doesn't have that sort of personnel. Tampa Bay, their defense, they've got one of the best defenses in the league. They gave up 41. That's more than they had allowed in their 3 games combined, their first 3 games combined. And now they're at home against Atlanta. Tampa Bay's lost 2 in a row, and their offense finally seemed to click in the second half of that game now that they're healthy. I feel like the Tampa Bay offense can hold Atlanta in check, the Tampa Bay defense can hold Atlanta's offense in check, and Tampa Bay's offense should be able to move the ball. Atlanta's given up quite a few points in all of their games this season. They've been over 20 in each game. And Tampa Bay should be able to get into the 30s. Atlanta, they've covered every game, but at some point that has to end. You're not going to go 17-0 against the spread. They shouldn't have covered against the Rams. They were down 28-3, and the Rams just let them back into that one. They gave them turnovers. That one's still smarts. That was one of my top picks of week 2. Gave them turnovers. They gave them a block punt return for a touchdown. So I mean, if Tampa Bay gets a 28-3 lead over Atlanta, they're not going to let them back in.
I see what you did there. Okay, and so that's your picks for the week. So just to recap, you've got the Jaguars -7, the Saints -5.5, the Dolphins -3.5, the Lions +3, and Tampa Bay -8.5. 15-4-1 so far year to date. So you're doing quite well in your super contest picks. And in Survivor this week, just listening to your things there. I was thinking of the Jags, and then I remember you once said, don't waste a pick if you have one. Like, what are you saving a team for? So I officially submitted in my Eliminator Challenge the Tampa Bay Bucks to beat the Falcons. Who do you like in Survivor this week, Dean?
I definitely like both of those teams. Jacksonville and Tampa Bay are both viable options if you have them. I also think Buffalo is probably the best option. Hard to imagine they're going to lose at home against the Steelers with Pickett making his first start. The Steelers have lost to the Patriots, Jets, and Browns, and the Bills are a lot better than those teams. They miss TJ Watt, man. They'd be 3-1 right now without him, but they still don't have him, and their offense is not good enough to make up for that. So the Bills, so there's the Bills, the Jags, and the Bucks are the teams that I'm going to use for my Survivor entries. Also, good options would be Minnesota at home against Chicago. Even though Chicago's 2-2, they're probably one of the worst teams in the NFL. They almost didn't beat the Texans. They only won by a field goal at home despite running all day. And they've been handled on the road pretty convincingly twice. So you always got to be careful with Kirk Cousins because sometimes he's a stud and sometimes he's a dud.
Unfortunately, I've been playing Kirk Cousins roulette in fantasy, and I've yet to actually hit that one. I feel like as soon as I drafted multiple quarterbacks, I was destined for failure, having to pick which one to go. So the Kirk Cousins Trey Lance show, and now I'm rolling with Kirk Cousins. He's all I have left. So hopefully, it's just he's able to step up and get the ball to Jefferson and just get him his own every week from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, how hard is life when you have Justin Jefferson to throw the ball to? Cousins sometimes makes things harder than they have to be, but he's made out like a bandit. How much guaranteed money has he made? More than anybody in history, I think, right? I mean, I don't know if it's more than anybody in history, but hundreds of millions of guaranteed dollars. He definitely has a good agent.
As you started making up numbers there, I thought to myself, oh no, is this going to be the perfect segue into Hogan's Tall Tales? Because maybe Dean Lang will get called out. Somebody one day will post something and say, you know what, Dean said on the fourth bag, you said this number. That's not true at all. But I know you usually know your stuff.
I'm estimating. It's a little, I'm not presenting it as fact. I'm pretty sure he's gotten a lot of guaranteed money. I don't know the exact number, but yeah, I mean, I'm not a guy who cooks stories like Hulk Hogan, but anyway, I did some digging and I wrote out Hulk Hogan's Tall Tales last week and filled front and back of a page with it. Actually, yeah, there are just a shitload of these, and I by no means got them all. So
One off the top of your head you want to share, or do you want to hold that for next week?
well, we'll give them this one. Hogan claimed that Andre the Giant and he drew the 40,000 at Shea Stadium in 1980, when that was a mid-card match, and the actual match that drew the card was Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko. That was the main event. That was what drew the house, because that was mentor versus pupil. It was a steel cage grudge match. Sammartino was World Wrestling or Worldwide Wrestling Federation champion for about 8 years uninterrupted in the 60s and into the early 70s. And Zbyszko was the hot young prospect at that time. And Hogan and Andre were guys that were, well, Andre was kind of in his prime, but Hogan was pre Hogan's prime. And also Hogan lost that match. But anyway, Hogan could have claimed he partied the night away with John Belushi after the showdown at Shea, because that's in New York City, and that would have actually been believable. Belushi was still alive in 1980. We could have bought that. He probably would be in New York City. It's believable. That would have been believable instead of WrestleMania 2 when he'd been dead for 4 years.
Every good star gets their facts mixed up once or twice, and maybe Hogan just had a bit of a brain fart and just mixed that one up. Maybe he had that one written down. He's like, you know what, I'm gonna say this, and he just said it at the wrong time. Who knows? It's Hulk Hogan.
I don't know where these stories come from, but yeah, I think next week we're gonna have like a solid 5 to 10 minute segment where I just read off a whole bunch of them and we get some good laughs.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it, Dean. Enjoy the games as always this weekend, and we look forward to getting those Hogan stories next week. It sounds like a great time.
All right, Chris, sounds good. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Cheers, Dean.
Cheers.